In the 2003 movie Pirates of the Caribbean, blacksmith William Turner joins up with notorious pirate Jack Sparrow. As you can imagine, in the colonial times in which this story is set, teaming up with a pirate is maybe not the best idea. But it turns out that being with Jack is quite good. He is adept at saving his own skin and even at saving the people around him, even if it's a means to his own ends. The pair find themselves on an adventure to rescue Elizabeth Swan, the daughter of the governor of Port Royal, and also someone with whom William has found himself desperately in love. Elizabeth has been taken captive aboard the dreaded Black Pearl by Captain Barbossa and his crew, who are on a mission to lift the curse that's been placed on them for stealing Aztec gold. As William and Jack are creeping into Barbossa's hideout, Jack begins telling the upstanding William that maybe he's not quite as upstanding as he believes himself to be. Since they've been together, Jack notes, William has engaged in multiple acts that could very well have himself on the way to becoming a pirate. William helped free Jack from prison. William helped Jack commandeer a ship of the Royal Navy. And while William may have compelling reasons to have done both of these things, according to Jack, William is also obsessed with treasure. Of course, William scoffs at this. How could he, the honest, hard-working local blacksmith, be, of all things, a pirate? And furthermore, Will argues he is not at all obsessed with treasure. Jack, in response, delivers one of my favorite lines of the movie, "Not all treasures silver and gold, mate." Now, even though Jack is talking about William's bonny lass Elizabeth, indicating that Elizabeth is also like a treasure to William, that line always makes me think. Not all treasure is silver and gold. And that line also, I think, coincides nicely with today's gospel reading. Like those stories about pirates seeking treasure, we as Christians are also called to seek treasure. I don't imagine that many of you came to church this morning expecting to hear our gospel tie in with a story of pirates, but here we are. Today, we are reading the story of the parable of the rich fool. A crowd has gathered around Jesus one day, a crowd of many thousands of people. In fact, this crowd is so huge that people are trampling on one another. Jesus, though, in the midst of this, begins to speak, first to his disciples, but soon to the crowd. He starts by giving them words of warning and words of encouragement, but he's soon interrupted by a shout coming from the crowd. From Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 15, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me judge or arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." That's a hard one to learn. We live in a world that is driven by materialism. We are bombarded with advertisements and temptations to always have the latest and the greatest, the newest and the coolest. Consider some of these stats. According to the LA Times, the average American home contains 300,000 items. And we're not even talking about an episode of Hoarders. The U.S. Department of Energy says that one of every 4 homes that have a 2-car garage can't fit a car in said garage because it's too crowded with other things. From the Wall Street Journal, Americans collectively spend about $1.2 trillion per year on non-essential items. And the Huffington Post says that the average American will throw away per year 68 pounds of clothing. To go along with this last one, a study by ClosetMaid found that according to a survey of 1,000 women, the average American woman has 103 items of clothing in her wardrobe. Of those items, 33% are too tight, 24% are too loose, 12% haven't even been worn, and 21% are just unwearable. And if you're doing the math, that leaves about 10% of a wardrobe to be left to be worn. Now, I know that this study focuses on a woman's wardrobe, but if I were to be honest, I don't think my own is in much better shape. I think I'm just missing those clothes that are too loose. I wish a few more were too loose. We are a society that treasures possessions, and this man that asked Jesus to be the mediator between this brotherly dispute over an inheritance proves to me that this isn't a new phenomenon. It may be amplified today, but it's not new. Treasure is something that has captivated the imaginations of people for generations, perhaps back to the beginning of time. From the Egyptian treasure thief to Sinbad the sailor to Long John Silver and Treasure Island to Indiana Jones, I would dare say that every time period and every culture has had legends about treasure. Nothing really compares to those stories of a treasure map with an X marking the spot. What's at the end of that trail of dotted lines? What's hiding underground beneath that X? How is it going to change the lives of the characters? What if we were to find a treasure map? It's the start of a great story, isn't it? And it continues today. Have you watched the History Channel lately? It's less that pesky history thing, and it's more about finding treasure. Aside from shows finding that one super valuable, one-of-a-kind item in pawn shops or picked from the overcrowded homes of Americans, one of their current longest-running shows, and I have to confess it's one of my personal favorites, is The Curse of Oak Island, a show about two brothers from Michigan who are digging for treasure on an island in Canada. Like William Turner, you could say we are also obsessed with treasure. But here we have Jesus telling us, be careful of any type of greed. Not just greed driven by money, but greed driven by possessions as well. Any type of greed. Life is not comprised of an abundance of possessions. It's as if Jesus is giving us a different treasure map. And instead of that fabled X marking the spot, it's got something else written on it. What might that be? Let's go back to our gospel from verses 16 through 21. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. This parable starts off innocently enough. The rich man needs a place to store his crops. There's no harm in that. But where the story takes a turn is what the rich man decides to do. He doesn't just build a place to store his crops. He builds himself a stockpile. And worse, he builds himself a stockpile for his own comfort. There's nothing wrong in storing what we need. There's also nothing wrong with having possessions. Jesus' story doesn't focus on the fact that the rich man already had barns, in fact, ones that maybe sounded like they were a bit more practical. Instead, Jesus' story picks up when the rich man decides to build bigger barns to hoard everything for himself. When we store up our personal treasures and belongings like this rich man, and when God calls our number, what will we have to show for all of that? We can't even control what happens to them after we're gone. Sure, we can will them where we would like them to go, but we also can't control when two brothers might fight over that very inheritance, can we? And how much of that goes to waste? How much do we sit on that we don't use? things that could be used by people who really need them, people that might give up what they have for just a portion of what we have. Are we storing up our physical treasures like this rich man? Are we building our barns for our own good, for our own comfort? Is our treasure map marked with a big red X? Our treasure map doesn't have to look like that. As I said, Jesus is giving us a different type of treasure map. Picture a treasure map in your mind. Or better yet, let me help you. Here's a picture of one. Your regular old treasure map usually consists of two main things: a large red X where that treasure is buried, and a series of dotted lines that shows us the steps we need to take to get there. For the treasure map Jesus is providing, however, we can replace that single red letter with three letters even more valuable: G, O, and D. Instead of that X marking the spot where we become rich with earthly treasures, those things that we can't take with us and we can't control what happens to them when we're gone, God now marks the spot. When we get to our destination, now we will be rich toward God. But how do we get there? What does that even mean, being rich towards God? How do we do that? If we take Jesus' story literally, he's telling us to not be like the rich fool, the rich man who stores things up for himself. He is greedy with his possessions. So if we aren't to be like him, being rich towards God means we do the opposite of what he did. So there's a start. Don't be greedy. As our reading from Colossians earlier said, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Okay, keep our minds on God and not on all of our possessions. What else? Boyd Bailey wrote an article on wisdomhunters.com titled, "What Does It Mean to Be Rich Toward God?" That sounds like a good place to look. In it, he says that being rich towards God means to treasure what God treasures, my relationship with him and others, lost souls, love and compassion for hurting human beings. To be rich toward God is to be rich in good deeds, rich in generosity, and rich in relationships. Be rich in good deeds, help those around you. Be rich in generosity, give what you can to those who need it. Be rich in relationships, value your relationship with God and with others. I don't know about you, but I think that hits pretty close to the mark. Our rich fool in Jesus' parable went 0 for 3 on these. He built bigger barns for himself. He didn't help anyone else with their barns or with their crops. He made his own bigger. He didn't give his surplus crops to the hungry or to the poor. He kept them for himself so he could take it easy for a few years. He obviously didn't value relationships because what he did was for himself only. Let's go back to our treasure map. We have our destination being rich toward God. I think we can replace our dotted lines now. What if our path to being rich toward God was dotted with being rich in good deeds, rich in generosity, and being rich in relationships? Personally, I think that's a pretty good treasure map for us to follow. Enjoy your possessions. Don't think that I'm standing up here telling you that you shouldn't have any. I don't think Jesus is saying that either. In fact, we can point to multiple instances in the Bible where Jesus commends those who love and help others when they don't give up everything that they have. Zacchaeus, for example, volunteered to give half of what he had, plus he would pay back those he cheated fourfold. He didn't volunteer to give everything he had away. But Jesus still said that salvation had come to his house that day. I believe this all comes down to your attitude of love toward God and toward others. Are you doing what you are able to love God and to care for his people? Or are you caring so much about yourself and what you have that you fail to care for others? Don't let your possessions stop you from doing good for others. Don't let your possessions prevent you from giving to others in need. Don't let your possessions hinder you from building relationships with others, and most importantly, with God. I'll end this morning with a story. A man is on a long journey. He's far from home. He comes to the home of a wise man and is invited to spend the night. As he is in the wise man's house, one by one, each of the wise man's daughters come out and greet him. The first daughter comes out, and she says that her name is June because she was born in June. She is practiced in reading fortunes, so as a gift, she tells him about the future of his journey. She leaves, and the man's second daughter comes out. She says her name is August, and because she was born in August. She is an expert in medicine, and she offers to heal his wounds from the rough road. Finally, the third daughter comes out. She says her name is Maple because she was born under a maple tree. She knows of a great buried treasure, and she gives him the treasure map that will lead him straight to it. Too excited to sleep, the man immediately goes out to find the treasure. He spends hours and hours digging and finds nothing. When he comes back to the wise man's house covered in dirt, the wise man is outside waiting for him. The man confronts the wise man about this treasure that his daughter spoke of. Why did she give me this treasure map that led to nothing? Oh, said the wise man, you actually met April. April Fools. Don't go for that fool's errand of stockpiling earthly treasures and belongings. Follow your map, the one that Jesus gave you. Be rich in good deeds. Be rich in generosity. Be rich in relationships. And if you follow that path, God will mark the spot. God will be your treasure, and there your heart will be too. Amen.